Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's subject lesson. My name is Maggie Mautane. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. We are going to interact with one another, and then any question that you need clarity on, please WhatsApp to 079 454 9538. Today's lesson is on marketing South Africa as a tourism destination. Our key objectives that we are going to concentrate on today is the importance of marketing South Africa internationally, The core business of South Africa tourism, opportunities for marketing initiatives, funding for South Africa tourism's marketing initiatives, the concept branding, also introduction to tourism, Indaba travel shows. And then this topic is at term 2, week 15 in our CAPS document. Let us start with the first objective, the importance of marketing South Africa internationally. Why do we market South Africa as a destination? The first one is to increase annual volume of foreign arrivals in South Africa. We must be able to increase the number of tourism that visit South Africa as South African tourism. And then when we increase the annual volume, we are going to create jobs, and then we will have a growth in the GDP, and then also we are going to attract new markets and maintaining the existing markets that we have. And then also we are going to set multiplier effect in motion. And then the second one under the importance why we market is to increase international awareness of South Africa as a travel destination by hosting a global events. When we host global events, is then that the international markets are aware of our products in South Africa. For example, we had the 2023 Netball World Cup that was held in Cape Town. In that way, we had media coverage, we had tourists who came to watch the netball, and thereby awareness it is brought internationally. And then like now, 3 days ago, we had the 2023 BRICS Summit, which was held in Sandton City Convention Center. In that way also, the world was aware of South Africa. And then some of the tourists, some of the dignitaries who visited or who attended the summit, they were able to visit some of our attractions as their secondary purposes in South Africa. Media coverage also, they were able to expose some of the attractions that we have in South Africa. Hence, we must market our product. That is why we say South Africa has a very, very important job to do in terms of marketing our subject. And then the second one, the core business of South Africa. What is the core business of South African tourism? First of all, market South Africa internationally as a tourism destination of choice. This is the core business of South African tourism, is to market South Africa internationally and also domestically so. The second one under the core business of South Africa tourism is to coordinate and enhancing the standard of facilities and services for tourists to enjoy. And then we have this, the TGCSA, that is responsible for enhancing those standards of facilities and services on accommodation specifically. If our accommodations, they are of a high standard, tourists who visit internationally, they will enjoy the stay in our country. The third one under the core business of South African tourism is to coordinate the marketing activities of role players in the industry. When we talk about the marketing activities of role players, we have local role players, we have those that are in our provinces, the 9 provinces, and then we have those that are smaller, in smaller sectors, that are responsible for marketing South Africa. But South African tourism is their responsibility to make sure that all those role players, they work together in order to advertise excellent products internationally and also domestically. The third one, opportunities for marketing South Africa. What are the opportunities when South African tourism market our product internationally and domestically? The first one we have an opportunity of marketing our product on international platforms. The first one, we've got the IT Berlin. This is an annual show that is held in Berlin, and then this type of a platform is where South Africa represent all sectors to showcase tourism products such as accommodations, such as tour operators. They go there to showcase, and also the car rental companies. They go to this platform to advertise what we have in South Africa, so that international tourists, when they visit, they know where to enjoy, they know what services they must use. And then also we have the second international platform, the World Trade Market, which is held in London. And then also these platforms, these show ones, they are held annually. South Africa, they send representatives there in order to showcase our products. And then in World Trade Market, we have professionals that are from our industries, whereby they connect with other countries, and then in there they learn how to do business. They network with everything that they have in order to make sure that our products, they are marketed accordingly in those platforms. Our fourth objective, funding for South African tourism international marketing and initiatives. Marketing as its own, it needs money. We cannot just market our product without money. But where do we get this money in South Africa in order to market our product? We have this levy which is called TOMSA. TOMSA is a levy, it's not a person, it's not a sector, but it's a levy that is charged from consumers for the use of specific tourism services in South Africa. If tourists visit South Africa, or if South Africans, they visit an accommodation sector as an example, they are charged this levy, and then this levy, it will be used specifically for marketing. And then how it is collected, because I say levy, it is an amount, if I may say in a simpler way. The levy is voluntary by business. Businesses, they volunteer to contribute to this levy. And then it is, because it is voluntarism, accommodations and car rentals, they are specific businesses that most of the time they volunteer to contribute towards this levy. And then this levy from the businesses, it is paid monthly to TBCSA. TBCSA, Tourism Business Council of South Africa. They will be paying this money annually to this one. And then what will happen to the money from the TBCSA? TBCSA do not use the money. What they do, they transfer the funds to South African tourism on a quarterly basis. There is no usage of this money from the businesses. They are just transferring them to TBCSA, and then TBCSA will also transfer the money to South African tourism. And then at the end, South African tourism will use the funds to promote South Africa domestically and internationally as a preferred travel and tourism destination. How is domestically being used? We are using this money to make copies for the materials for advertising, and then also because we talked about international platforms like ITB together with World Trade Market. This money will help South African tourism to take the products there, to make a stand there whereby it will showcase their product there. So this money is used specifically for marketing. As we know that marketing needs more money to do that. Now, we've got businesses that volunteers in South Africa to contribute this money towards there. The marketing of what? And then use money for marketing materials and travel shows. Marketing materials, we are talking about the brochures. We are talking about advertisements on internet, marketing materials and on radios and any social platform that we know we uses it for advertising. The fifth one, we've got the concept of branding. South Africa's brand logo. Remember I said we have products that we must advertise. We cannot advertise, we cannot market anything, but we are talking about products. I talked about accommodation, I talked about car rentals, I talked about all the products that we know, attractions. Those are products that we do in tourism. But they cannot just go there on platforms without any branding. Hence, we have this one concept of branding. What is branding? We say brand is a name, a slogan, or a symbol, or a combination of those that identifies the offering of business or destination to make it stand out of its competitors. We are competing with the entire world, international. Now, when we compete, we need to brand our product in such a way that they outstand towards their competitors. Now in South Africa, South African tourism, we have decided that we are going to use this logo, inspiring new ways. And then inspiring new ways, when you see on the picture, it has got our flag, South African flag. And then when we do our branding, this will create a positive, unified image of South Africa, one that bears pride. We know that we've got pride on our colors on that flag. So we are using this brand to market our product internationally. So when they see this inspiring new ways with our beautiful colors, they will know it identifies the country that we are from. And then also brand. When we use this brand, it promotes investments and tourism and helps new enterprises and job creation. What are we saying about the job creation? Those who will be responsible for branding our product, they will be employed. And then also, what it says, it promotes investments. Investments such like, now we've got BRICS. Countries are here, they are going to invest more on us, but specifically with our tourism products. And then we have this one, the last one of our key objectives in marketing. Introduction to the tourism Indaba travel trade shows. We talked about the international ones, the platforms, the IT Berlin, together with the W World Trade Market. Now we've got our own South African travel shows, in which before we enter the international markets platforms, we must showcase those products in our platform first, domestically. So we've got the South African travel shows, the Africa's Travel Indaba as the first one. And then what do we do in this platform? It attracts international visitors and media across the world. When we do these shows, because we will be having all Southern African countries showcasing all their products, all the 9 provinces will be there. Those that are specializing in the Big 5, those are specializing in this luxurious hotels and everything, we will be there. And then when we are in this platform, that Africa's Travel Indaba is where we've got a media coverage. The entire world will be on us. We will be advertising across all the media. Then that we are able to have tourists coming to our South Africa to enjoy what we have. And then also under Africa's Travel Indaba, we showcase tourism products such as travel packages. As tourists, as South Africans, we can go there and buy packages of every destination that you need, and then you will enjoy them later. And then we have the second one, the Getaway Show. Remember I say Africa's Travel Indaba, they showcase travel packages. But we've got this one, the Getaway Show, as the second one, whereby we showcase outdoors and adventure products, such as camping equipments, such as 4x4 equipments. Is where we are able to know, when I want to do camping, what type of a caravan must I take, what type of equipment must I take. And in that way also, we are able to buy packages and then we enjoy them later. So these are our local travel shows. Remember, we've got 2 international travel shows. Now we've got 2 local or domestical travel show where we can go there, different sectors, different businesses, they will showcase their product there. And then everyone is welcome to go and buy and enjoy later. And then even nowadays, because the technology has been improved, even the gadgets, you can find the gadgets for camping, you can find any gadget that you need, as long as if you are an adventurous tourist, to enjoy what you are buying. We did objectives. They are 6. Why we must market our products. We did the travel shows. Why, on how we budget and how we advertise. Now, because we are having this topic, it must be there in our question papers. In front of us, I've got an example of exam paper, but it is taken from the Gauteng question paper of preparatory examination 2022. And then it is specifically based on this topic, marketing. And then it is found in question number 6. It will be saying question number 6, marketing. And then remember, I have done our logo, the brand logo that we use for advertising. Now, this is the logo on your question paper. It will be saying as an example. I'm not saying it's going to be on your question paper this year, but it is an example or an extract from each question paper. Study the logo below and answer the questions that follow. We have inspiring new ways. Question 6.1.1, it says, name the organization that makes use of the above logo to market South Africa. Already we have done that. You will know what is that. And then number 2 says, explain which funds are used for the marketing of South Africa by the organization mentioned in that question 6.1.1. Not long I've been talking about that tourism levy. You already know when you talk about that fund, what is that? And then another one, a big portion of the total number of tourists that enjoy traveling in South Africa are domestic tourists. Discuss 3 ways in which the organization mentioned can assist in increasing the number of domestic tourism. In that way, you will be able to tackle any question that you have. In some of the questions papers, there won't be this logo. There will be TOMSA itself. There will be IT Berlin itself. There will be WTM itself. So as a grade 12 learner, you must be able to answer all the questions that is on marketing. Do not go astray. Concentrate on most of the things that I've been saying to students. You will be able to answer the question. And then when you answer this question, sometimes there will be a case study that needs you to interpret. Make sure that you concentrate on what is taught inside the classroom in terms of marketing. If they talk about accommodation, you know that they will be talking about quality service. Tourism Grading Council of South Africa, it will be there. If they want funding, TOMSA will be there. If they want the international markets platform, ITB Berlin together with World Trade Market will be there. But if they want to advertise South African product together with the one on the SADC, you will be talking about Africa's tourism in Durban. The getaway, they will be having caravans, they will be having 4x4. Please do not mix such. As long as if you know step by step what is needed of you to explain, make sure that you concentrate. I have the memo for that question, of which I'm not going to answer because we are talking about the possible answers. But it will depend on you on how you interpret the question. As long as if you are not out of the marketing topic, you will be able to answer this. And then I hope with this one, you will be able to answer anything that is on marketing. Please, always when you study this topic, put your pen down and then jot what you want to know and why. Remember from the beginning, I was talking about why you market, where do we market, how do we get funds. This is what you do when you do your revision on this topic. From me, Maggie, I say thank you very much and then all the best and good luck.
grade 12 learners, welcome to today's tourism lesson. My name is Tobile Mabuza. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. In front of you is Tobile Mabuza. I'll be presenting world time zones. Here is a summary of what we're going to be learning under world time zones. Remember that time zones, you've got the theory, the concepts of time zones, and then you've got the calculations. For today's lesson, we're going to start with the theory, and then we'll move on to the calculations. So under the theory, there are certain concepts that you need to familiarize yourself with. Most of the time, these concepts are will appear in section A, your short type of questions, and will also help in interpreting some questions when you are doing world time zone calculations. What is a time zone? You need to know that first. So the time zones are divisions of the world by lines of longitude into 24 zones, more or less 15 degrees wide. Remember, when we talk about our lines of longitude, we are referring to the lines that are running north to south. Time zones are indicated as imaginary lines that run from north to south down the globe. Each zone represents 1 hour. Time zones usually follow country border, state lines, or natural boundaries. Governments make the choice of which zones to follow. Some countries have more than one time zone, especially if it's a very broad country. When we say broad, meaning that it's a country that is very wide in shape on the map, and it has many time zones, lines of longitude going across. Russia has 9 time zones, and the USA has 4 time zones, and Australia has 3 time zones. Before I go further with my lesson, if you've got any questions or need clarity, please send us a message on our WhatsApp line 079 454 9535. So you will see here on the slide over here, I've got a time zone ribbon, the time zone ribbon. Each of these represents a time zone. Each of these are time zones. So we have ones that are shaded in gray, ones that are shaded in white. But I'll elaborate and explain further on this once we are seeing a time zone map. This is a snippet of our world time zone map, the one that you need to familiarize yourself with, which will usually come in the exam paper, in your question paper. All question papers come with the world time zone map. So you should be able to navigate, to use the map in order to understand 3 things, in order to be able to do your calculations properly. Each time zone map comes with a 24-hour clock. So in most cases, you'd be asking yourself, but then what is this over here? What is this clock doing? We refer to it as our 24-hour clock, and it comes in handy when we are calculating our time. Okay, on the map, on the time zone map, it is important to know where the north is, where the north is, where the east is, where the south is, where the west is. And it is also important to know about the different hemispheres, the northern and the southern hemisphere. It's also important to know where the universal time coordinate is located. Remember that when we talk about the universal time coordinate, it is the 0 degrees line of longitude, of which the UTC is responsible for coordinating time. It is where the world times come from. When we talk about something coordinating, meaning that it is the one that is responsible for arranging time throughout the world. We refer to it as the UTC. And it's also important, as I've mentioned, to know about the northern and the southern hemisphere. In most cases, how we memorize the northern and the southern hemisphere, we know that in the northern hemisphere, when it is summer, it is winter in the southern hemisphere. And remember that when we explained what is a time zone, we spoke about that it is those lines of longitude that are running north to south. So if you look at this particular time zone map on the yellow line, we did indicate that that is our line of longitude. So those lines, each line, individual line that is running north to south is referred to as a line of longitude, and each line of longitude represents a time zone. And then when you see these arrows here, the east to west, when you're traveling east to west, we subtract. When you're traveling west to east, we add. These will all start making sense once we are doing our calculations, but it is important to master navigating through your time zone map. And then we've also got the international dates line at the 180 degrees line of longitude. It has a zigzag shape, and it is important to always write concepts out in full. So if I'm talking about the IDL, I'm actually referring to the international date line. In some textbooks, it would say international driver's license or so on, but to provide clarity for yourself and for the marker, just write everything in full and avoid abbreviations. Do make us do make us aware that you are aware that it is the international dates line and not just an IDL. So you will also notice that on your time zone map, you've got the gray and white areas. The gray and white areas help us when we are working on our time zone map in identifying which city is located on which time zone. I will make an example. Let's say we are looking at Johannesburg. Johannesburg is shaded in gray, and Johannesburg is actually on +2. And where it is +2 on the time zone ribbon on top, it's also +2. It's shaded, and also on the map where it's written Johannesburg, it's shaded, which means that Johannesburg would actually fall under that particular time zone. So also on our time zone map, we had the lines of latitude that run east to west. And also on our 24-hour clock, it is important that when you navigate on this clock, you ask yourself, am I going clockwise or anti-clockwise? If I'm going clockwise when I'm calculating time, it means that I'm adding. If I go anti-clockwise, it means that I'm subtracting. So why am I talking about this 24-hour clock in this manner? It's because in the exam, you might find that you followed all the correct steps, but then you start making a mistake when you get to the 24-hour clock and not going the correct direction on the clock. Then you find that now your answer becomes incorrect. So it is important that when you stand on the 24-hour clock, before deciding on what to do, you ask yourself, am I adding or am I subtracting? Do I go clockwise if I'm adding, or do I go anti-clockwise if I am subtracting? And then also know the equator line, which is at the 0 degrees line of latitude. You should also know that. And then the lines on the time zone map, as I've mentioned, latitude are the lines that run west to east or east to west. Longitude are the vertical lines that represent a time zone, and each is equals to 1 hour. And when we look, I'm just going to go back. When we look at the time zone map in terms of the lines of longitude, if we say now Johannesburg is on +2, it means that when in terms of their in terms of the line of longitude, we would actually say that Johannesburg is on the line of longitude 30 degrees east. So you need to be aware that as much as Johannesburg is on +2, but in terms of lines of longitude, it's actually on 30 degrees east. And then also we spoke about the equator, and the equator is responsible for dividing the Earth into the northern and southern hemisphere, and the universal time coordinate. Time zones are named from the UTC, and it refers to +2 would refer to 2 time zones from the UTC. The plus refers to east, and the minus refers to the west of the UTC. So if we go back to that map, just to back up what I am saying. So east of the UCT would be where it is the plus signs, that is east of the UCT, and the west of the UCT is where we would have the negatives. So east of the UCT would be our +1, +2, +3, +4, and then would be the east. All the time zones that are on the east would have the positive sign. All the time zones that are on the west would have the negative sign. And then also mentioned that we have the international dates line that runs, that's found at the 180 degrees line of longitude, and it runs around countries and islands. The international date line is responsible for the changing of the dates. In past question papers, more especially in section A, you'd find a short question that is referring to the international date line, asking what is the international date line responsible for? Is it responsible for dates or time? But if you must know that the international date line changes the dates. So a flight crossing the international date line from west to east, you will gain or repeat a day, and a flight crossing the IDL from east to west, you will lose or skip a day. These concepts are very important because some learners do not like answering time zones or have an attitude towards time zones. So it's always possible to get and pick up some marks from the theory part of time zones. And then seasons, we mentioned that if it's summer in the northern hemisphere, it means that it's winter in the southern hemisphere. And then you've also got the prime meridian and the Greenwich meridian, also called the Greenwich meridian. This is an imaginary line that runs through the town of Greenwich in London. It is the 0 degrees line of longitude. So it's referred to as the prime meridian or the Greenwich meridian. And this particular line also divides the Earth in the western and eastern hemisphere. Remember, the equator was dividing the Earth into the northern and southern hemisphere, whereas the Greenwich meridian or prime meridian is dividing the Earth into the western and eastern hemisphere. And then we refer to local time. When we talk about local time, we're talking about the specific time at a certain location. It is the time that everyone in an area agrees upon as the local time. Examples of local time would be if it's 1300 in South Africa, it is 1300 throughout South Africa. If it is 800 in New York, that is the local time in New York. And if it's 1200 in London, that is the local time there. And then when we refer to standard time, it is the time zone that a country uses, not DST time. It is according to the time zones as indicated on the map, and it remains as per law. So the standard time is the time zone that the country uses. Examples of standard time: South Africa's is +2, 30 degrees east, and the standard time for New York is -5 and 75 degrees west. So as I explained earlier, saying that the line of longitude where Johannesburg, South Africa is located is on +2, which means that it is a 30 degrees east line of longitude. So when we refer to the standard time of New York, which is -5 or 75 degrees west, we are referring to the line of longitude, which is on 75 degrees west, would be the line, would be the line of longitude for New York, meaning that the New York time zone is on -5, but in terms of the lines of longitude, it's actually found on the line 75 degrees west. Then the standard time for London is 0 degrees, but in summer, standard time gets adjusted. We know that when we talk about summer, in summer, standard time gets adjusted, we're actually referring to daylight saving time. Then we talk about the 24-hour clock, which is a very important concept. Remember earlier I showed you the 24-hour clock on the map, but now you need to understand the importance of using the 24-hour clock and writing the time in the 24-hour clock format. The 24-hour clock should be added to time zone when it is used for test and exam purposes. According to the 24-hour clock, we do not use AM and PM anymore. Example, 8 AM is not correct. We also do not add the H to any times on the clock, example 0800. If it is 8 o'clock in the morning, the 24-hour clock format will be written as 08:00 or 0800, meaning that when you answer time zones in the exam, it is very important that when you write your final answer, you write it in the correct 24-hour clock format. So below is a table summary that is showing us that if it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon, the 24-hour clock format, or the correct format in which your time should be written, will be 1500. If it is 3 a.m. in the morning, the correct format is 0300. If it is, and the incorrect format would be 3 o'clock or 03H 100 00, or however you interpret it. But it is important to write the answer in the 24-hour clock format. And then this is a 24-hour clock quick drill activity where you give the correct formats for the following times according to the 24-hour clock. So if it's noon, it's 1200. If it's 8 in the evening, it's 2000. If it's 10:30, it is 10:30. 9:30 in the evening is 21:30. Midnight is 0000. Then we're still on the concepts. I have highlighted there the international dateline and how it has a unique shape going through some island destinations. And remember that it's not like we have two international datelines. We actually have one international dateline. It's just that the map is represented flat on the surface, but the Earth is actually round, which is resulting into one international dateline. So on the time zone map, it will seem as if we are having two separate international datelines, whereas we're actually having one when the Earth, because the Earth is round. This is just for display purposes because the map cannot be round on paper. It's flat on paper, but you need to be aware that we've only got one international dateline. And then important facts that you should know about the international dateline. As I've mentioned, the international dateline appears twice in the time zone map, and it does not mean we have two international datelines, and we actually have one. The international dateline rounds down the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and tourists flying across from west to east gain a day, they repeat a day. So if they are flying from the west to the east, they repeat a day. If they're flying east to west, they lose a day, they skip a day. In some past papers, you would have found the question where they're asking if someone will gain a day or lose a day. So you have to understand the concept of the international dateline. And then the time zone map and the shading, I did explain that on the previous slides where we spoke about the white and the gray shaded areas. So the white and gray shaded areas group countries together that use the same time zone. So example, South Africa is shaded gray. No time zone is indicated in SA. +2 is indicated in Botswana, also a shaded area. Therefore, SA will make use of the time zone +2 with Botswana and the rest of the shaded countries in Africa until you reach Egypt in the northern part of Africa. And then we talk about the dots. It is important that the dots at the cities, which time zone should be used. Example, New York, the name of the city is printed in the ocean area, but the dot is on the name area. Therefore, -5 will be used. So we don't look, I will just show you on this particular map, we don't look where the name of, we don't take the time zone where the name of the city is written. Here's New York here. So if I were to say, New York is on -4, I'd be incorrect. I need to look at the nearest land where there is a dot and it is on -5. Because if I say New York is on -4, I'm actually saying New York is located within the Atlantic Ocean. So don't always look where, you will look for the name of the city, but also be sure that you find maybe the nearest dot where it is the nearest land and take that time zone. Okay, so we know that the shaded areas we know that the shaded areas group cities together, and also the unshaded areas. So as they explain that, okay, Johannesburg is here at +2, but there's no +2 that is directly written next to Johannesburg. But you can see that all the shaded areas that would be near Johannesburg would actually be forming +2. Botswana is also on +2, and yeah, Botswana is also on +2, and it is also shaded, so all shaded areas will form part of +2. If we look at London, it is on 0. So all the shaded areas that fall under 0, and if you look at the time zone ribbon, it's also shaded in gray, would fall under 0 as a time zone. So that is how why our time zone maps have different shadings. It just helps us to distinguish one time zone from another time zone on the map. And then we have a time zone identification drill activity where you have to complete the table by adding the time zones of the cities. Because also, this identification process is very important, because once you identify a time zone incorrectly, it affects your entire calculations and it will affect your final answer. So mastering how to identify time zones is a very crucial skill that you should have. So in Johannesburg, it's +2. Auckland Park is, not Auckland, Auckland, New Zealand is +12. New York is -5. Adelaide is +9.5. And Jakarta is +6.5. And then we have the frequently asked questions on the time zone identifications. You'll find learners saying, what does 0.5 on a time zone represent? The 0.5 is equivalent of 30 minutes. If a time zone is +6.5, it actually means 6 hours 30 minutes from the universal time coordinate. Some learners would ask, ma'am, what does 0.75 represent? 0.75 is equivalent to 45 minutes. If a time zone is a +5.75, it means that it is 5 hours 45 minutes from the UTC. Okay. And then we have daylight saving time, DST. So DST is a better way of making use of daylight by adjusting the clock 1 hour ahead during the spring and summer months when DST starts. The clock is set back again 1 hour during the winter and autumn months. DST is also known as summertime, but you know that we sometimes avoid writing in the abbreviations. You should write it out in full. Daylight saving time. And then when we look at our illustrations, our pictures here at the bottom, they just give us an indication of daylight saving time. Means that you are putting your clock 1 hour ahead during the spring or summer months, and you'll take it 1 hour back during the winter or autumn months. And then the reasons for making use of daylight saving time: make extra use of daylight saving and make use of extra daylight in the evenings. There's fewer road accidents and less injuries occur because of better visibility. The extra daylight hour in the evening can give more time for social activities. An extra hour of daylight in the evening may boost the tourism industry, as it creates the opportunity to increase participation and in outdoor activities, which leads to an increase in demand for tourism, which leads to more profits due to the demand for participation in tourism activities. And DST also reduces the use of artificial lighting during the evening hours. So those are the reasons for practicing DST. In the exam, you may be asked as reasons why do some countries practice DST. The impact of daylight saving time on travel plans. Remember that you need to know before you travel whether the country that you are going to travel to is practicing DST, so that you can make the necessary arrangements, you can make the necessary settings and book and all those things when it comes to making bookings, to make yourself aware that that country is actually using daylight saving time, and also to change your clock also to 1 hour ahead. Travelers must be familiar with time changes, especially when flying eastwards or westwards. They must know when a country is using DST and whether they'll be crossing the international dateline, as this can affect times of flights, catching trains, and check-in times. So you need to be aware of whether a place is practicing DST, a country is practicing DST, so that you can make the necessary arrangements. And then when is DST practiced? Daylight saving time will be applied in the Northern Hemisphere in the spring months, approaching springtime in the Northern Hemisphere. It begins in March. This means that the countries or cities that are using DST will adjust their clock 1 hour ahead between the months of March, April, and May, which is considered as springtime. June, July, August is the summer season in the Northern Hemisphere. So as spring kicks in, those countries in the Northern Hemisphere that are practicing DST will adjust their clocks 1 hour ahead. And then the countries in the Southern Hemisphere practicing DST will adjust their clocks 1 hour ahead between September, October, and November, which is springtime. So here the theory of seasons, the theory of hemispheres and seasons comes to play, where you need to understand that it is summer in the Northern Hemisphere, it is winter in the south, and it is winter in the Southern Hemisphere. So hence you need to know what what purpose the equator serves in dividing the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere. December, January, February is the summer season in the Southern Hemisphere. So now that also puts us into clarity that yes, September we start thinking that it is summer, but it's actually spring. Whereas December, January, and February is the summer season in the Southern Hemisphere. So since South Africa is located in the Southern Hemisphere, now you are aware that December, January, February, it is the summer season in the Southern Hemisphere. Meaning that other countries within the Southern Hemisphere that are practicing DST would practice DST between those months of September, October, November, December, January, and February. Remember, DST means clock are adjusted 1 hour ahead. This can be done by identifying the original time zone of a country and then adjusting it to 1 hour ahead. So this particular statement will start making sense to you once we are doing our time zone calculations, where we identify a time zone of a country and adjust it to 1 hour ahead in terms of DST. So if London is using DST, London time zone is 0, but since it is using DST, we adjust it 1 hour ahead, which will make London +1 in brackets DST. Now here's a practical application of how of adjusting 1 hour ahead in terms of DST. DST is always adjusted eastwards. That is my theory. So if you look at the time zone ribbon, remember I refer to this as the time zone ribbon, we will always go to the east when we are adding DST. Sometimes you find learners saying, ma'am, if New York is practicing DST, it will be on -5. It will be on -6. New York won't be on -6 when it is practicing DST. Because New York is originally on -5, it will be on -4. Because remember what we are saying is that when we adjust DST, we always go eastward. We always go to the right. So if city on +1 is using DST, it will be on +2. A city that is using DST, if it's on +2, it will be on +3. A city that is using DST, if it's on +3 and is using DST, it will be on +4. A city that is using DST, if it's on +4, it will be on +5. So if we go west of the UTC, a city that is using DST, which is on -11, will be on -10. A city that is using DST on -10 will be on -9, that is using DST. And most of the time now the learners start to sing along and say, oh, okay, if a city that is on -11 is using DST, it will be on -10. A city that is using DST, if it's on -10, it will be on -9. So it just now enforces the principle that when we add DST on identification of a time zone, we will always go eastwards, because when we add, we always go eastwards. So this is 1 hour adjustment of DST. And then also, what is also very important when we are calculating DST, you'll see, when we are calculating DST, it's always also important to identify the original time zone. So when we talk about identifying the original time zone, like here, the one that is circled as -9 is the original time zone. So -9 is the original time zone, but because of DST, it will be -8 DST. It's very important to indicate the original time zone and also to indicate the DST adjusted time zone so that we know that you are aware that in fact this area or this city is on -9, but because of DST, it is on -8. So you have to indicate. So if it's on 0, the original time zone, you'll indicate that yes, I know that it's on 0, but because of DST, it is +1 DST. Then the marker or the educator knows that, oh, okay, this learner is aware that the original time zone is 0, but because of DST, it will be +1. Okay, over here is just a little activity of where you have to complete the table, identifying the city's original time zones and identify time zones if DST were to be applied or practiced. And then Paris is on +1, but if DST is applied, it's on +2. London is on 0, but if DST is applied, it is on +1. Madrid is on +1. If DST is applied, it is on +2. Canada is on -7, but if we apply DST, it will be on -6. New York is on -5, but if DST is applied, it will be on -4. And then here's a DST, daylight saving time based activity. Mandisa and Bongwa's travel plans. So this clearly tells us that Mandisa and Bongwa have travel plans that will be affected by daylight saving time. Mandisa, I'm departing from Bangkok to Beijing at 5 on 7 October. My flight is 5 hours long. Well, Bongwa, I'm going to London during summer. I depart from OR Tambo International Airport at 2000 on 21st October. My flight is 11 hours long. Here in frame 3, Bongwa answers, London is practicing DST during your visit. What is the time difference between South Africa and London during this time? So now this is from a past question paper, and in most cases our time zone questions come in the form of a scenario. So you need to understand the scenarios and read through them very carefully. Then you apply your daylight saving time knowledge. Now over here the question was based, is it possible for London to be using DST during October in 2020? Motivate your answer. The answer is yes, it is possible. London is in the northern hemisphere, and April to October is considered summer in London. DST applies in London from 29 March to 25 October. And then over here we've got just past question paper examples from our short type of questions in section A, or multiple choice questions. Countries in the northern hemisphere practicing daylight saving time would usually during the months of A, September, October, B, October, November, C, June and July, D, April and or May. So over there, the correct answer is D. They would practice DST during the months of April and May. Then the next question was the time zone of a country situated on the 60 degrees east line of longitude. Is it A +6, B -6, C -4, or D +4? The answer is D +4. And remember earlier on in the lesson, I did talk about these 60 degrees east line of longitude and how lines of longitude represent different degrees, which are equivalent to time zones. Okay. A travel agent explains to a tourist how to adjust his watch when DST is practiced in a particular country. Is it A, put his watch 1 hour forward, B, put his watch 1 hour back, C, leave his watch as is, D, change his watch to UTC time? The answer is A, put his watch 1 hour forward. So these are just questions of which you can like go through with the past question, using the past question papers. Then we move on to time zone calculations. When we look at time zone calculations, we need to be able to work out arrival time with or without DST. We need to be able to work out departure time with and without DST. And we should be able also to understand jet fatigue and jet lag and be able to interpret our calculations and our answers and so on, whether a tourist would suffer from jet lag or jet fatigue, and also understand the concept of jet fatigue and jet lag and the symptoms of jet lag. But when it comes to calculations, you should be able to calculate arrival time with or without DST. You should be able to calculate departure time with and without DST. Okay. Then we look at using the time zone ribbon to calculate the following. Just calculating the time difference, like the time difference between Johannesburg and Los Angeles. So what I usually tell my learners is that you first need to identify the two areas. So when we talk about Johannesburg and Los Angeles is on -8 or -8, and Johannesburg is on +2. So this is how we get the time difference. Some of you might say, okay, I will say 8 minus 2, 8 plus 2, but I always say to my learners, let us just bunny hop. So bunny hopping entails from -8, I bunny hop to +2. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours is the time difference between Johannesburg and Los Angeles. And so it will proceed that way with all the others. You just need to identify the two places and then you bunny hop from one place to another in order to get your time difference. Because when you work out your time zone calculations, there's a step where you need to work out your time difference. And then when we talk about the world time zone and deciding working out the directions, when we go west, we minus. So when the direction is going west, we minus, and when the direction is going east, we add. So west, we subtract, and west to east, we add. And then we move on to time zone calculations. Then we'd like to thank Mr. Rodney for the visual method that is used in most schools nowadays and has simplified time zones. So over here, the important questions that you need to ask when attempting a time zone calculations, which is illustrated using 6 steps. You need to ask yourself, which 2 places have I been given in the scenario? When I say which 2 places, meaning which 2 cities have I been given? What are the time zones and the given time? And what is the time difference? And you also need to ask yourself, what is asked? And which direction is the question mark? Do I add or subtract the time difference? Now, calculate time in New York if it is 10 in Johannesburg. So you'll first identify New York. New York is located on the is located on the west of the UTC, and Johannesburg is located on the east of the UTC. So the question states, calculate the time if it is 1000 in Johannesburg. So New York is on -5 and Johannesburg is on +2. And it's always important to read your calculation, your instruction or the scenario very carefully. So we know that we've been given the time because step 1 was saying which 2 places. So which 2 places is New York and Johannesburg? And what are the time zones in the given time? We identified the time zone for New York as -5, and we identified the time zone for Johannesburg as +2. And what is the time difference? So in order to get the time difference, remember, we have the method of bunny hopping, and we've also got the method of adding or subtracting. Remember that when we go from west to east, we add. If the direction is east to west, we subtract. So over here, the time zone is the time zone difference is 7 hours. And what is the time zone difference and what is the given time? So the given time is 1000 and the time zone difference or the time difference is 7 hours. Now we've got the question mark here. The question mark is saying this is what is being asked. And now you also need to ask yourself which direction is the question mark. When they're asking when you are asking yourself which direction is the question mark, is it on the east or to the west? So our question mark of what is being asked is on the west, which means that, remember we said that when we go from east to west, we subtract. So will you be adding or subtracting the time difference? That depends on the direction of the arrow. In this case, we will minus. So it will be 1000. If it is 1000, it's going to be minus 7 hours time difference. So if you look here below, there is a summary over here. So this is what I will see in your paper, depending on the method that you're using, or we will see this. But this over here at the bottom of the screen provides a summary. So if New York is on -5 and Johannesburg is on +2, the time difference is 7 hours. The time in New York is 10 o'clock, which was the given time. You ask yourself, what time do I have? I have 10 at New York, and then it is -7 hours. It is -7 hours. So now I want us to go on the 24-hour clock, because if it is 10 in New York, remember the question states, calculate the time in New York if it is 10 in Johannesburg. So if it is 10 in Johannesburg, what time is it in New York? So I will stand at 1000 and ask myself, when I'm at the 24-hour clock, am I going clockwise or anti-clockwise? So when I go anti-clockwise, I am subtracting, because if it's a minus, I am subtracting. So subtracting, I'll be bunny hopping 7 hours. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Meaning that the time in New York will be 0300. And then if the question had a date attached to it saying calculate the time and date in New York if it's 10 in Johannesburg, 16th May or 17th May, the answer would have had to include the dates as well. But in this case, the question did not indicate the dates, it just indicated the times. But when we reached our final answer, we just said 0300, same day. But it is important to always write the date, the time, and the dates if provided. And then this particular question, calculate the time in Sydney if it is 2200 on 16 June in Moscow. Keep the 6 questions in mind when doing each step. Okay, so remember the first step, we need to identify which 2 cities we are working with. So in this particular question, they're saying calculate the time in Sydney if it's 2200 on 16 June in Moscow. So we have to identify the time zone for Moscow. We have to identify the time zone for Sydney. Moscow's time zone is +3. Sydney's time zone is +10. And then we know that it is 2200 calculate the time in Sydney if it's 2200 on 16 June in Moscow. So over there, the time difference, we have 7 hours, which is the time difference. Here's the time difference. We've got 7 hours. And then the time in Sydney is 2200. So we know that we've got the time for Sydney, but we want the time, we've got the time for Moscow, but we want the time in Sydney. So the direction of our arrow indicates that we are going to add the time difference. So it's 2200 plus 7 hours. So you stand there by 2200 on the 24-hour clock and you ask yourself if you are going clockwise or anti-clockwise. So Now we bunny hop 7 hours. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It will be 0517 June in Sydney. Remember that when you cross the 00, you need to automatically set your mind that if I'm using the 24-hour clock and I cross the zero on the 24-hour clock, it means that I'm changing a day. The date will change. So in your mind, you need to click that now that I'm crossing the 00 and I'm adding, it means that the date is changing. So you need to go back to your question and check what was the date and how will the date be affected. And then we've got time zone skills and DST tips. We've done that on the previous slides where we just said when we're doing DST, we adjust eastwards. So a city on -9 will be on -8. A city using DST on 0 will be on +1. A city using DST on +5 will be on +6. Remember to write the city's original time zone as well as the adjusted time zones when you do your calculations based on the adjustment of the time zone. Then here's an activity on basic time. I'm actually going to do this with you because it's a DST based activity. So they state here, after Gareth had completed his surfing practice session at 1700, he made a call to his coach in London to report on the sea conditions in Durban. London is practicing DST. So when you get a question on time zones, they will make a note there at the bottom. So that's why it is important to read your question until the end. A note will be made that states London is practicing DST. So each time zone calculation, if DST needs to be applied, you will be made to note that that particular place is using DST. So in this case, London is practicing DST. In your mind, it needs to automatically click that, oh, this question is a DST-based question. So remember, we first ask ourselves, what are the two places that we are dealing with? Okay, we are dealing with London and Durban, which is in South Africa. So if London is using DST, London is originally on 0, but because of DST, it will be on +1. So if you look here, we have the 0 for London, which is the time zone for London, but because of DST, it will be on +1. So when I'm working out my time difference, I'm going to work it out from the DST adjusted, the +1 and the +2, which gives me a time difference of 1 hour. So over here, we've got the time difference of 1 hour. The time at which Gareth completed his surfing session was 1700. So we know that when Gareth completed his session, it was 1700 in Durban. And now we want to know what time will it be in London by the time Gareth makes that call to his coach. So it'll be 1700 minus 1 hour. I stand by that 17 and I ask on the 24-hour clock, and I ask myself if I'm going clockwise or anti-clockwise. Am I adding? Am I subtracting? If I'm adding, I go clockwise. If I'm subtracting, I go anti-clockwise. So yeah, we go anti-clockwise. And when Gareth makes that call, it will be 1600. Okay, we've now mastered determining basic time. We're going to now be working on calculating the arrival time. The next step is being able to add flying time to basic time. So I always say this to my learners, that you need to master calculating basic time in order to be able to calculate arrival time. Remember, arrival time, you always add, the flying time is always added to the basic time. So if a question states that you need to calculate your time of arrival, if you've mastered calculating basic time, you will also be able to master calculating arrival time, because calculating arrival time just entails you adding the flying time. And then in some cases, if the scenario consists of stopover time, it will also be added to basic time in order to get the time and date of arrival. So maybe if passengers are in transit and you need to calculate the time, including the stopover time and the flying time. Just to get the time of arrival, you will add those times that were stated in between. And then time of arrival calculations. Mr. and Mrs. Gordon visit their daughter Roxy in Los Angeles. They fly from Johannesburg to New York. They have a stopover in New York and then fly from New York to Los Angeles. Find the flight details below. So the flight from Johannesburg for Roxy, Mr. and Mrs. Gordon, when they are visiting their daughter Roxy, the flight will be 16 hours of flying time. The stopover time is 5 hours. And then New York, so Johannesburg to New York is 16 hours of flying time. The stopover is 5 hours. Then New York to Los Angeles is 6 hours and 30 minutes of flying time. Then now we're practicing a question on time of arrival. So when we look at this question on time of arrival, remember we follow the steps that we have been following, where we need to identify the two places that we are dealing with. We know that from our case study we are dealing with, they say the flight departs from Johannesburg on 4 October at 0500. Calculate the arrival time and date in New York. Note, New York practices DST. So we know that it's a DST based question. So in this instant, we have New York, which is on -5, but because New York is practicing DST, it will be on -4 because of DST. But whatever we do, we work it out from the DST adjusted time zone. So we know that over here we have New York here on -4, -5, -4, we'll be working from this one, -4, and then you've got SA, which is here at +2. So we work out our time difference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours is the time difference. And then we know that it is 0500 in South Africa. We're trying to work out the time in New York. So it'll be 0500 minus 6 hours. When you look at the direction of the arrow, it tells us that we are going to minus. So we minus 6 hours. We stand at 0500 and we ask ourselves, do I go clockwise or anti-clockwise? Am I adding or subtracting? So I stand by 0500 and I go anti-clockwise 6 hours. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which lands me at 2300, which is 3 October. Then in order for me to get the arrival time, it is going to be 2300 plus 16 hours. So in order also to get the arrival time, I still go back to my 24-hour clock. I stand there by 2300 and I bunny hop 16 hours of the flying time in order to get my arrival time. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, which lands me at 1500 for October 2021. Was there a date change? No, there wasn't a date change. The date stays the same. So you can see that from the first step, we always maintain the same steps. And I always encourage my learners that when you calculate when you do time zone calculations, it's very important not to leave it blank or not to attempt the question, because there are part marks in between. So learners must not be discouraged from answering time zones. They always need to attempt answering the time zones, because even though the final answer is incorrect, we go back and check the steps and then we award marks based on the steps that have been correctly completed. Okay. And then, still on calculating arrival time, Mr. Anderson flies from London to New York on 21 September. His flight departs from London at 1600. His flying time to New York is 8 hours. Calculate the dates that Mr. Anderson will arrive in New York. So the important facts that we need to gather here is that Mr. Anderson flies from London to New York. So we are dealing with London and New York. His flight departs from London at 1600 and his flying time to New York is 8 hours. So we're dealing with the two places, New York and London. New York is on -5, London is on 0. Our time zone difference there is 5 hours. And then we know that we've been given the time for London, which is 1600. We need the time, we need the time for New York. So that arrow over here is indicating to us that the direction in which we need to go, because we need the time for New York, we will have to subtract the time difference. So it will be 1600 minus 5 hours of the time difference, which puts us at 1100. And then in order for us to reach this step, adding the flying time, we will add the flying time. Remember, the flying time to New York, they said it was 8 hours. So at this step, it is where we add the 8 hours flying time. And we arrive at our answer as 1921 September. So the dates didn't change. It stayed the same. So, but when you do your time zone calculations, guys, read through the scenario, identify the important elements or the important words that actually will assist you in completing your calculation, and follow the steps. So you can use the visual method, you can use the method that your teacher taught you if it's different from this method, but as long as you reach the correct answer. And then you'll be calculating departure time. What's important to remember is that to get the time of departure, flying time is always subtracted. Remember, when we wanted to get arrival time, we would add the flying time. But when we want to get departure time, we subtract the flying time. The calculation is done in reverse from arrival time at the destination city back to an earlier time when the plane departed. So therefore, flying time is subtracted in order for us to calculate departure time. And then the time of departure calculations. A family from Argentina flew from Aries to South Africa. From Argentina, flew from Aries to South Africa for their holiday. They arrived on 3 January 2013 at 8:30 at OR Tambo International Airport after a 9-hour flight. So when we identify, we can see we are dealing with Argentina and South Africa. Those are our two cities. And we've also got their arrival time when they arrived there at 8:30, and we've also got the flights, the flying time. So, 2.1.2, they say calculate the time and date the family departed from the airport in Buenos Aires and show all calculations. So over here we do have we can see we're dealing with Argentina and Johannesburg. Argentina is on -3 or -3. Johannesburg's time zone is on +2. And then the time zone difference between the two cities, it is 5 hours. And then we know that they arrived at 8:30, but we actually want now the time at which they left Argentina. So we know that in order for us to know what time they left, the direction that the arrow follows is subtracting, which means that we will have to subtract. We'll have to subtract our flying time in order to get our departure time. So if we look at this particular calculation over here, we know that they arrived at 8:30, but now we want to work out what time they departed. And we know that they arrived at 3:30, and minus the 9 hours flying time puts us there. So if we look at the summary of the calculations, calculate the flying time and date if the family departed from the airport in Buenos Aires. Show all calculations. So over there, we are sitting at 16:30. We're sitting there at 16:30. It's not 3:30. It's not 3:30. It's 16. It's 18:30. And then over here, Okay, and then over here we've got calculating the total duration of the Gordon's couple trip from their departure from Johannesburg to their arrival in Los Angeles. So Johannesburg to New York was 16 hours flying time, and the 5-hour stopover in New York, and then New York to Los Angeles 6 hours 30 minutes. So Johannesburg to New York flying time is 16 hours. We add the stopover time in New York, which was 5 hours, and that leads us to New York to Los Angeles was 6 hours 30 minutes, and the total for the entire trip was 27 hours 30 minutes. Then there's these concepts that you need to know: jet lag and jet fatigue. When we talk about jet lag, we are referring to a travel-related condition due to a long-haul flight and crossing many time zones. So you look at your calculations and you look at your time difference. Is it a long? How long was the flight? How many time zones are crossed? Especially when crossing time zones from east to west against the rotation of the Earth. Example: Japan to New York and Rio de Janeiro would lead to jet lag. As a learner, you should be able to identify jet lag from calculations, answers, analyzing duration of the flights, time zone difference, and also on the time zone map. You should also know the symptoms of jet lag. Those questions in most cases are always there. And you also need to know how to deal with jet lag before and during the flight and after the flight. So before the flight, exercise as much as possible, eat healthy, rest as much as possible, go to sleep, and get up earlier every morning. During the flight, you should drink lots of water, stay away from coffee and alcohol, eat healthy foods, try to sleep, take jet lag pills, and walk down the aisle at least once an hour. And after the flight, adapt to the local schedule as soon as possible. And then we've got jet fatigue. Jet fatigue is a travel-related condition that is experienced after a long-haul flight, but over here a traveler crosses few time zones. Example: if someone is flying from Johannesburg to London, they'll be crossing a few time zones, so the learner will, depending on the flying time, the tourist will suffer from jet fatigue and not jet lag. So jet lag, we look at the time zones and we look at the number of time zones crossed, and we look at the flying time. That will determine whether we are getting jet lag or jet fatigue. Then with jet fatigue, we just check how the fatigue that is experienced after a long-haul flight. So you look at your calculations and check whether is it a long-haul flight or a short-haul flight, but actually it is a long-haul flight, but crossing less time zones or few time zones results to jet fatigue. And then I just want to wish you luck for the upcoming preliminary exam. And I also urge you that don't leave any questions unattended. Always attempt your time zone questions because there's always part marks that are awarded. Please, grade 12s, do your best, give it your all, and thank you for listening to today's lesson. All the best.